about to begin. We want to welcome you to the Vampire and Devil Show. We want to welcome you to the Vampire and Devil Show. It's gonna be bloody fun. We're gonna kill everyone. Welcome to the Vampire and Devil Show. With lots of blood and lots of guts. Two horror fanatics and rock and roll nuts. Welcome to the Vampire and Devil Show.
Devil, I got a question for you, my friend. Have you ever wondered what would happen when you pit two families of like cannibals mixed with like redneck, mixed with like electric toys, mixed with shotguns? Because it seems like, strangely enough, we have an eerily similar showdown for the fangs this time out. Very, very interesting decisions on both of our parts that I didn't really think about until I was looking over our notes and being like, man, statistically, stylistically, of this particular showdown, while it is about what movies you and I feel are sequels that are actually superior to their originals, it is funny that while we do try to be cognizant of having our showdowns be of relatively equal value, this one is shockingly like two heavyweights like duking it out, bro, as we've got Devil's Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 fighting it out with the Devil's Rejects.
Yeah. I mean, we've always had this. Sometimes we've done these showdowns where we've had a common denominator. And again, in this one, we do when we have Bill Moseley, who is in both movies. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely very. We will get into it, but even with Devil's Rejects, Rob Zombie is a huge fan of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre series, and stuff like that. So there's definitely with the similarities of writing, with House of Thousand Corpses, and then continuing the story on of the family to Devil's Rejects, you can definitely tell a lot. But yeah, you notice it and you knew about it, but until you really watch both these movies kind of back to back, you don't realize like it almost is kind of eerily the same movie somewhat. I mean, there's definitely different things, and there's definitely, not saying that, that Rob was copying, obviously Texas, because Texas Chainsaw 2 came out beforehand, but it was like that the little nod to it. But it's also, other stuff, when we get into the Devil's Rejects that he added different other stylistics. I mean, a lot of people consider that sort of a Western movie too. It's got a little Western kind of feel to it. But anyway, these two movies, are about as close, I think, as two movies that we picked, from two different directors. I mean, we can pick a movie from same director and do something, but for being two different directors, two different movies, two different series, two different franchises.
Yeah. Two different families.
Yeah, two different families, but yeah. I mean, it's all good, we like it's that, southern hospitality that will kill you.
Exactly. Just a little bit a little bit of the bubbly, a little bit of the bloodly.
Yep.
But let's start it off, my friend. In fact, why don't we just kind of rock it in chronological order, man? Why don't we jump into Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2? Again, part of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre series, spearheaded by the Leatherface character. But again, we are blessed with the ever so bitchin'ly awesome character of Chop Top, played by Bill Moseley, who's still a character that I'm incredibly fond of to this day.
Oh yeah. Like the first time I got to meet Bill Moseley at a convention, that's the first thing that I got him to sign was a 8x10 of Chop Top, because I mean that was I mean, I've seen Bill Moseley in other movies. You know, he was off. Obviously, you know, we talked about the remake of the Night of the Living Dead from the '90s. You know, he was in the Blob movie, but you know, obviously, these Rob Zombie movies that he's been in. But for me, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 is where I fell in love with Bill Moseley, and is probably even my favorite character of all the characters he's done. Chop Top is probably downright my favorite, and it's kind of cool too because Chop Top, you know, like this movie, it was a sequel. It's a sequel that was directed, you know, which is kind of cool because both of these movies are both sequels. They're both sequels that were directed by the director who directed the original first ones. So
Yeah.
that's kind of cool too because you know obviously Toby Hooper did the first movie. He did this. He did the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. So it's a lot of continuation with the Sawyer family and Leatherface, and now Chop Top is a new character, but he's part of that family, and he's actually half brothers of the hitchhiker from the first movie that everybody knows, the crazy dude with the switch. He had the little, the not switchblade, but the little,
Straight razor.
the straight razor that he was like, taking pictures of the Polaroid and, cutting the guys. So yeah. And even in this movie, we do have a somewhat of a cameo of the hitchhiker because Leatherface, when we finally see the first time we see Leatherface in this movie, he's got like this dead corpse that's kind of attached to him that he can move around kind of like a marionette, which is actually supposedly the corpse of the hitchhiker from the first movie.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I love the thing I also love about this movie straight off the bat is that it gives you more of, in my opinion, that in-depth look of the Leatherface family. Of course, you still get that in the original Texas Chainsaw, and you understand what this family's about and kind of their involvement. And there's prequels that come out down the line that really try to delve into that. But what I like about Texas 2 is you really get those characters, and they're more about those characters. They're a little bit more detailed and stuff, where as opposed to having Leatherface as the focus, of course, where he's got siblings, he has these other people. It gives equal love, specialty scenes, specialty kills, crazy behavior for these other characters, not just Chop Top, even though he's a very predominant and dominant figure in this movie. But there's multiple cases of just, non-Leatherface involved, scenes, detailing other members of the family, which I really dug, something I really appreciated. And I think that is also something very cool that Toby got to do, direct, again, because he did this movie. And it kind of reminds me of other sequels and stuff when they're able to do a little bit more backstory in follow-up movies, where if the director's still the same, and there's not a lot of those cases, but there are a few, it's kind of cool to see a continuation of a director's vision to a certain degree.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like, and one of the reasons why I chose this one as a movie that I think is better than the original, and that's not not saying anything bad about Texas Chainsaw Massacre 1, because I love that movie, and it is a straight up kind of more serial killer kind of choppy killer kind of thing. Where I like this one because this one had that the campiness of it, but not too overly campy. I think it had the comedy in it, but it was like comedy that was not like ha ha comedy. It was more like tongue in cheek and B rated comedy, where it was like comedy about horrific stuff. Like in this movie, like in the beginning when you finally meet Leatherface, is these two idiots that are going around Texas driving. I guess they're going to do like a Texas football game or something party, and they're out there shooting at their guns at like the stop signs and road signs and stuff like that, and they eventually run into Leatherface, and and it doesn't do very well. They get buzz sawed, but they were on the phone with a radio, live on a radio, and then I just love it because like the running joke throughout the whole movie with Bill Moseley and Chop Top's character is like, "Hey, can you play that song you played on the radio? You know that one was and it's just like just a lot of like a lot of stuff. The lick my plate, dog dick, and he says that the dogs will hunt." And which is funny because that's actually used in a Primus song from Race Car was a Jerry was a race car driver. All of a sudden, it just comes out of nowhere. You're like, wait, is that freaking Chop Top? So that's pretty sick. And then then you add Leatherface, you got Chop Top, you add Dennis Hopper, which I'm a huge Dennis Hopper fan, and then you add Caroline Williams, which is like one of my favorite characters and Stretch in this movie. And we know her from other horror movies, but also she's a huge benefactor or helper of a lot of Wednesday 13 things. So like it's cool that he's got to work with someone like him. And I know Wednesday's a huge. We've talked about it before. He's a huge Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 guy too. So I'm pretty sure. I mean, I'm not gonna put words in his mouth, but I think he might agree with me on Texas 2 being better than Texas 1. But like I said, I'm not saying it for sure, but I can pretty much probably go there, especially because of the fact that everybody loves Caroline Williams.
Yeah, no, absolutely, for sure. And that honestly makes three of us, because we're getting we're ahead of ourselves when it comes to the obituaries. Fangs, we're not going to get to that quite yet, but I do agree with Devil 100% that I too believe that Texas 2 is better than Texas 1. Again, iconic, set the trend, fantastic. There's just those nuances that we'll continue to get into that Texas 2 has. Because it was funny, Fangs, when I was talking to Devil about this particular showdown, I was like, and he told me what his pick was. I was like, fuck you. That's a really good pick. That's what I would pick. And then I had to like rack my brain thinking of what movie I would choose for that. And we were shooting lists kind of back off each other before settling on the movie that we'll discuss in a little bit. But yeah, no, it's such a good movie. It's so fun because also, like, again, there's that subtle comedy where, for the record, regardless of the movie, Bill Moseley is becoming known for some of just the greatest one-liners and just lines in general in movies. Like, I'll get into one of my particular favorite lines of Devil's Rejects when we're talking about Devil's Rejects. But just like you were just saying about his Chop Top character, he's like, he was also in Repo the Genetic Opera, which I absolutely love. And there's this line when he's singing about like who he is as a person, and he's like, I will find a hole and fuck it. And he's mostly talking about after he stabs a person with a knife, he's gonna then handle his business in the hole. I mean, his characters are so twisted and so whacked, but they are becoming iconic for just the one-liners that they use for any given scenes. And whether that's just amazing writing in the scripts from the people who know they're going to be using Bill, but more likely the fact that he gets so into those characters and he's just so good that I'm sure there's an insane amount of improvisation that he's just absolutely killing it on with a lot of these great quotes.
Oh yeah. Just like just the handful of times I've got to meet him at cons and stuff like that. He's always really quick. If somebody says something, he'll like pull out like a one liner just really quick. Like he's good at like doing that quick, like bounce off each other kind of improv kind of comedy and stuff like that. So I would imagine that some of it was probably scripted, but some of it they were probably just like, yeah, Bill, just go ahead and especially later on in the second movie we're going to talk about with Devil's Rejects because of him having that rapport with Rob, and Rob probably was like, what do you think he would say in this? So I think maybe some of that stuff that he does in that movie is definitely more from the head of Bill versus the writing what was on the script. But yeah, like I said, I just thought this movie was just like the original one was just a straightforward kind of horror, kind of that kind of little stuff like that. Where this one definitely still has the gore factory and factor in it still. It's still got all that fun, but it's like, to me, it's like it's one of those movies. It's just a funner movie. Like Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a good movie to watch, but Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 is just, for me, it's just a fun movie. It's like you said, you add those one-liners. There's all a lot of little Easter eggs and stuff like that, like we were talking about with Nubbins, the hitchhiker being in it. When Dennis Hopper's character is like going out and finds where everybody is, he goes to a chainsaw place and he just puts his money down and starts grabbing big chainsaws. Then he grabs two chainsaws. Then he starts doing like these kung fu moves where he's like using it like a sword. And this old dude that runs the shop is like, the fuck is going on? Like, who the fuck chainsaws like that? And then he's like, do you want to, don't you want to test these chainsaw first? And so he goes out and starts freaking chainsawing the wood that there. And most people who just chainsaw wood are just like, he's chopping at it and slicing at it like it's a Ginzu knife or some shit. And this old guy's like just having a blast. Like, what the fuck is this guy doing? But just like that little stuff, you have where they're going into the camp where you find it, and he's going in and he's searching and he sees the wheelchair with the skeleton, which was his nephew, or not his nephew, he would have been his, like, whatever his relative was. I can't remember what he was. I think he was his uncle or something like that, so it would have been. But yeah, you found Franklin, and just like, yeah, it's just the little cool things like that with this movie. You got, which is, one of the iconic scenes in this movie is you got Grandpa. You guys finally get to see Grandpa in this movie. They're like, yeah, Grandpa's the killer. Get her, Grandpa. And he can barely, But the crazy thing about it, like, he looks like he's this dead dude.
Yeah.
But then once he starts getting that excitement of trying to kill, Caroline Williams and hit her in the head with a hammer, he just like kind of springs back to life, and you're like, wow, this dude really is alive. He gets a little bit of taste of blood in him and stuff like that. And then, like you said, you just add that little bit extra. You have Sawyer, where you have he's going around and doing these food competitions, the barbecue competitions, and he wins them all the time. And everybody's like, what is it? Why do you win all the time? He's like, it's the meat. And, obviously the meat that they're eating is all the victims that they kill. So, he's basically serving the community back to themselves.
100%, man. And it's also funny because, just like you were saying, to kind of like, piggyback off what you were saying about, like, the gore is still there, but the kills start becoming more unique, since that original Texas Chainsaw is kind of built more on that, dark, dank style of shooting, very warehouse driven, and the kills reflect that with the meat hooks and all that kind of stuff. You get, not like you said, not so much camp, but there's definitely a little bit more like bloodlust when it comes to like some of these kills and stuff like that. Like the fact that they lopped the one dude's like head like in half with the chainsaw was not something that they did, really in the first movie. Well, it's called the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Yeah, there's not overly much in the way of like chainsaw kills in that first movie. I mean, Leatherface does more damage to himself with a chainsaw than he technically does to his victims. He gets them with like other things. But I mean, he takes this dude's like head and just in halves it. But similar, and I always found this to be a little, I don't know if I want to necessarily say it's a nod to the first one, or maybe just a continuation of kind of the clumsiness that is Leatherface, is when he's flailing around the chainsaw trying to get these people, and he hits Chop Top's metal plate with it.
Yeah, I love that. I love like the sexualness of like the chainsaw, where he's going after Stretch and she's like in a tub of like soda cans or beer cans and ice, and he's like edging by her crotch, and like all of a sudden all the things are spraying and going all over her, and it's he's kind of like grinding the chainsaw like it's his member, and it's that very fun. Even in the movie they talk about it, like he she continues. I don't know why she gets away from these guys and lives, because Top's like, did you get her? And Leatherface is like, yeah, I got her. So he assumes that they're dead. And like I said, she could have just went on the rest of her life, and then all of a sudden she's like, let me go see where these guys live. I'm gonna go follow them. I'm like, yeah, okay. And then pleads for her life. Don't kill me. Let me go. I'm like, well, nobody told you to go there to begin with anyway. Why are you letting them go?
Told you to go back.
Yeah, and it's like, yeah, why would you follow them to begin with? But yeah, they make fun of Leatherface a little bit when they find that she's there, and like, oh, Leatherface got a girlfriend, oh, making fun of him and stuff like that. Where they kind of get into that silliness. Oh Jesus, really? Fuck you.
It still says it's recording on my end.
I don't know. We'll go back. But yeah, it's fucking damn scammers gotta fucking call you all the goddamn time. That's one thing the devil hates is fucking scammers. But anyway, yeah, like continuing on with that, yeah, it's just like, when you're going into like that, like, in these kills and everything like that, it's just, to me, like I said, it's just that that silliness, like all the other leather faces, it keeps going more and more. And then we're talking about, there's a deleted scene, and we love talking about Joe Bob, and
We
we
love
met
our
Joe Bob, and there's a deleted scene that apparently, because like him being that. But then I read something that that's kind of funny about Joe Bob, is that he loves Texas Chainsaw 1, he loves Texas Chainsaw 2, but he actually puts 4 above 3. And I'm like, what the fuck? The fourth one is like
as
the
in Next
worst.
Generation.
The Next Generation movie
Fuck
was
that
the
movie,
worst
dude.
one. I liked 3 Leatherface. It had Ken Foree in it. Yeah, was it as good as that? But the fourth one, it got too crazy with Leatherface being, and I have nothing against, the trans community and all that, but it was just a silliness version of it. I mean, all the other movies definitely showed like that little bit of like kind of like stuff. But yeah, just like I was like, out of all of the Texas Chainsaw, I mean, not until you start getting some of these remakes and sequels and prequel ones. But I mean, considering out of the first original 4, yeah, the new generation. I mean, other than Viggo Mortensen's character, which I liked,
Yeah.
that movie was horrible.
Right. Viggo Mortensen's character was great. Matthew McConaughey, not so much.
Yeah.
But like, no, Devil, I can't wait till you and I interview Joe Bob, because it's gonna happen. We've met him a couple of times before. He's a really good guy. We will get Joe Bob, but like, I can't wait to have that conversation, because Joe Bob, no, you are incorrect there, sir. That will not.
Yeah.
You
I mean,
know,
there's some movies that he goes and he gives 4 stars and 3 stars to. I'm like, maybe. It's all about personal opinion. I don't care whose personal opinion. There is no way in Green Earth or heaven or hell or wherever you're at that you can tell me that New Generation Texas Chainsaw Massacre 4 is a better movie than the third Leatherface. And that's not saying very much about Leatherface. Like I said, that third one isn't that great. It's definitely the second worst out of the 4
yeah.
movies. But it's still way more of a superior film than that fourth one.
The girl in the office flashing the traffic was the best part of the movie.
Yeah.
Like, seriously.
Yeah.
But nah, dude, it's crazy with that. But I mean, again, there's still those fun, subtle nuances, a little bit of campiness, like Fiend without a face. That fucking gets up after having their face lopped off. I'm kind of like, for real? If that's me, I'm staying down, dude. Like,
yeah. I mean, he's got like half of his skin carved off him. His back's all carved off. His face is all cut, and he's still hitting on her. He's like, "Hey, darling, go ahead." And then he's like, "Can you give me my hat?" And then obviously there's the iconic scene in this movie where Leatherface puts his face on Caroline Williams' face, which is kind of continuation of, we'll talk a little bit about faces being put on faces even in Devil's Rejects. You have a little bit of that too. But yeah, as I said, it's like, yeah, I just love the movie. And then you go around and Dennis Hopper's character is fucking crazy. He's chainsawing the place down, and he's going around there. He brings a freaking, then all of a sudden he's like chainsawing everybody, killing everybody. I love the main Sawyer guy. He's like, fuck it, and decides to like grenade himself and blows himself up, and then Caroline's escaping, and you get to see Grandma one. But then at the going into the end of that movie, again another scene that's kind of a throwback to the original one, the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. At the very end, it's got Leatherface kind of doing the twirl and changing the chainsaw and going crazy, and Caroline Williams at the end of this movie has got a chainsaw at the top of a mountain and is kind of going crazy and doing, maybe not doing the flippy twirly things, but she's still going crazy on this Texas Chainsaw. So I love it. I love it, like where there's like those little nuances of each one, where it's like, but like I said, this one, it's in the line of like movies that I enjoy. Some movies I think that are better sequels than the original ones, and then there's other ones that are just fun. This one together I think is a combination where I like this one. I think it is a better movie because of that. But like I always say, like, we've talked about this before, but like Gremlins 1 is a way better movie than Gremlins 2 overall. But Gremlins 2 is a more fun movie. I like Gremlins 2. I think it's campy. It's got the stupidness of it. And that's kind of like what this is, where like it's just a little bit differently, only because of the fact that I do think that Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 is a better movie than the first one, just because it gives you that little bit more. You got the in the first one you got the whiny kids that are going on vacation and doing all that stuff like that, and you're like, yeah, fuck these guys. I hope they all die anyway. So you're just. And then like you get into the house and you get some creepy stuff and there's people on hooks and like, but like the violence of that movie is not very much. It kind of just goes really quick. Where this one was just like straight up, the whole entire movie is nothing but fucking people getting lopped and killed. And like I said, yeah, it's got a lot of that campiness compared to the first one. It's definitely a campier movie. But then again, this one is an 80s movie, and the original Texas Chainsaw movie was a 70s movie. So
Right. And again, for me, it's got that character depth to it as well, which I really like, like more about the family overall. And again, everybody, as the saying goes, kind of everybody gets their flowers in this movie, like everybody kind of gets their periods of like shine throughout this movie, where it's not like, Leatherface and then people kind of in the shadows kind of a thing.
yeah. You get a little bit of that. You get to see what this family is about. You get to see how crazy and demented this family is, and the fact that they're killing these people and skinning them and eating them, and then you get the uncles, and you get Leatherface, and you get Chop Top, and you get, like I said, you bring in Grandpa, and then they talk about with Grandma and all this kind of stuff like that. So you just see like it's that family of, like you said, like kind of like rednecky kind of like Leatherface guys. It's just kind of very like I said, obviously the Leatherface character is based off of Ed Gein. So people like think that the Texas Chainsaw Massacre was a real movie. Oh yeah, I heard about all that stuff. No, it's based off of Ed Gein. There was a guy that was going around killing in Texas at one time with a chainsaw, but it was nothing Leatherface. He just kind of did that. But like I said, with this one, it's just that I think it's the performances of Bill and Chop Top. There's the performance of Caroline and Stretch, and then Dennis Hopper's character. You have those three together is what makes this movie such a superior movie, because it's just three over the top characters.
Yeah. No, 100% too, and that's even a interesting thing that we're going to get into, because it actually relays to the Devil's Rejects as well, is that psychotic obsessed sheriff character.
Yeah,
is something I didn't really think about until now, as we were talking about Dennis Hopper so much. But stick tight for the rest of that conversation, Fangs. Devil, let's get into the obituaries, my friend. Your movie, your call, man. Start it off. How are you feeling about how you want to put this in the kill ratings?
I mean, like I said, I mean, this is probably bar none one of my favorite horror movies, especially it's like I said, sequels. When we're thinking about sequels and what movie we want to do, and we'll continue on with the sequels series, as we progress more and more episodes. But yeah, I mean, Texas Chainsaw Massacre was the part two was the first one I thought of. Like I was like, you know what, this is like the essential of movies that I think that are sequels are superior than the originals. And like I said, you got those little nuances that bring back little pieces, bits and pieces of the original one. I love the fact, like I said, it introduced a lot of people, horror fans, to Bill Moseley with Chop Top. You had Dennis Hopper, who was an icon throughout the 70s and the early 80s anyway, with all the, all the movies that he's done throughout his career. So you're adding him. The fact that, most sequels don't typically get the same director, so the fact that Toby Hooper got to do it, so it's like, if somebody else would have made Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, even if it would have been the same way, same shot as what we got, if it would have been somebody else, it would have been a little bit different. But I think the fact that it was Toby Hooper taking what he considered maybe the first one being a more serious and kind of going, you know what, let's just take this crazy character, and it's like, yeah, this family's nuts, and let's just camp it up a little bit. What I mean? Because that's how these people would be. These people would be crazy. They're psychos. They don't care. You're crying and whining about, like, oh, please save me. They're gonna go. They're gonna make fun of you while they're killing you and chopping you up and eating you, because they're a psychotic, family. So I love that. And then adding Caroline Williams, and it's always nice seeing Caroline Williams, and Caroline Williams that still looks amazing. But Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, she looked amazing. Those legs, and like I said, Leatherface going after her like that. You never wanted to be a chainsaw more in your life when it was between her legs, but that's for another discussion. But anyway, yeah, like I said, to me, like I said, it's probably one of the closest movies that I could say is like, a superior over the original. And like I said, it's not dissing the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, because I'm a huge fan of that movie too as well.
Yeah.
So for me, I have to give Texas Chainsaw Massacre an 8.5.
All right, right on, man. Absolutely. I can definitely see you on that one for sure. I actually do hold this movie in high regard as well. I don't quite rank it up that high, but I definitely love the movie in general for all of those exact same reasons. Like I said, character depth. There's a rewatchability to this movie that we talk about during every episode, and this movie, frankly, Devil's Rejects is no different. There are rewatchability factors that are very strong in this movie, where I don't think it's where it doesn't come across as much at times like a sequel. It does have a certain amount of, like, stand on its own, but it still does connect as a sequel, because it still kind of needs that first movie to kind of shine. So, but again, you're right, Carolyn, Bill, they're all fantastic. Dennis, it's amazingly cast, and it's just overall, it's really, really strong. For me, I don't go like crazy far below you, but I do give it a 7.5 personally for myself. But between the two of us, I think that gives Texas Chainsaw Massacre a solid 8 if you agree with it, which I think is pretty good for it. Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2. What do you think, brother? 8?
Yeah, eight's a good rating for that.
Cool, man. Absolutely. So that's how it's going to be, Fangs. That's exactly how we're going to write it in, chisel it in stone, and carve it up with a chainsaw. Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 on the obituaries per The Vampire and Devil is an 8.0 on the obituaries, and that is how it shall be. And we're going to continue right on into its counterpart in The Devil's Rejects from Rob Zombie. Again, It is actually part of the Firefly trilogy, a series of 3 movies that Rob ended up doing about these characters. But just like with Toby Hooper, this is Rob's, second movie for this series, and a sequel, obviously, that he directed. Again, these aren't the only movies that have the director return, but there are not a lot of them. And this continues with the Firefly family based around Sherry Moon Zombie, Bill Moseley, and Sid Haig, which is, Baby, Otis, and Spaulding. And overall, I've always loved this movie. I think it's incredibly just well executed. So many different characters, a lot of character depth, but also some losses as well when it comes to this movie as well. I just mean like character losses, like really, really good characters that, again, we don't lose the characters. I should clarify, actress or actor losses, where we don't lose the character, but we do lose the person, most notably that being, Karen Black being replaced by Leslie, who was an absolutely great Mother Firefly. Frankly, when we get more into the jailhouse scene that she does with said psychotic sheriff, I really think Leslie excelled during that scene. But Karen Black's amazing, and she was fantastic in House of a Thousand Corpses, which is the counterpart and the original to The Devil's Rejects. But she and Rob didn't quite see eye to eye when it came to the paycheck for this movie. So, Karen decided not to take part in this one. But overall, I've always found this movie to be really, really excellent. Again, takes place around a family, out in the country, with just a very much warped sense of sensibilities.
Yeah. I mean, and like you were saying, and with continuing on from the House of a Thousand Corpses, I like the fact that you're continuing on with this family. You have the core ones, like you said, Otis and Baby and Captain Spaulding. But yeah, you continue on with Mother Firefly. Like I said, it's obviously with Leslie going into it, which, I mean, I love Karen Black. I've always been a huge Karen Black fan, but I've also been a huge Leslie Esterbrook fan. I'm a
Yes.
huge fan of hers from the Police Academy series. So, like, just to see her kind of get into this dirtier, grittier role, she nailed it. I think she did an amazing job in this. And then you're saying you've got a couple of the other characters that were returning. You have now I'm trying to remember this dude name. I knew Matt was the actor's name, but the brother that was really tall.
Oh,
Tiny.
I'm Tiny.
Tiny, you continue on with him. Obviously, unfortunately, they lost him. Lost the actor Matthew shortly after this movie came out, and then you have Muke's character, but he's replaced with the dude who played Sabretooth. I can't remember that guy actor's name either, but a couple of those ones that were changed throughout the plot. But the core of it was those movies were always Sid, Bill, and Sherry's characters with those 3. There was also, the continuation of, those movies into the other movies. There's actually a deleted scene, which was kind of funny. Like, I remember reading about it with Dr. Satan, being a huge character, and they were going to put him in this movie. And there's a scene where there is a hospital and he kills Rosario Dawson's character in this movie.
Yeah.
And it was really kind of weird and cheesy looking. And Rob's like, yeah, it doesn't really. He's like, it's like putting. I think he said it's like putting Chewbacca into like a classic movie or something like that. Like where it's like it didn't make any sense to have Dr. Satan in this movie, which I think would have been pretty cool. But like I said, after seeing the deleted scene, I was like, I agree why he decided to take it out. But yeah, I mean, like I said, it's a fun movie with that continuation of a family that you kind of learn a little bit about, and now you kind of go on this sort of voyage with them in this movie.
For sure. And that's the thing, is this movie definitely is more of a voyage, where Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 is more of that traditional slasher style, where it's, the scream queen, the final girl is trying to survive. It's the traditional design of those type of movies. And while we love Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, it fits right in that particular criteria. Devil's Rejects really is an entire voyage, because the fact of the matter is the movie opens up with them basically being busted by the cops. Their house has been found by the sheriff's department and surrounded by SWAT and all that, you know, and basically they have to blast their way out mixed with, just kind of scurry their way out and stuff like that, where Rufus, ends up getting killed during the shots, the fight scene. Mother Firefly is actually captured. You know, Tiny Otis Baby and Tiny Baby and Otis all escape. Tiny kind of goes off doing his own thing because he's not really present. So he's like he's kind of in the woods doing his thing. So he's not really present for the scene. So he's able to escape, but Baby and Otis are able to escape, and they end up hitting up Spaulding, to let him know, hey, the cops just busted us. We all need to meet up at our chosen location. Kind of like in a fire drill at work, everybody knows like where to go, and because they were warning Spaulding that the cops are most likely going to be coming after him as well. But then it takes you on this giant arc of kind of hiding, ducking, weaving, and killing at the same time. Where you've got Spaulding, stealing a car from a mom and her son, basically punching the mom, and then kind of like PTSDing the child by being like, what, you don't like clowns? If you can't, I'm going to come back. And if you can't give me a reason why you hate clowns, I'm going to murder your family. Like crazy little stuff like that. And then you've got, of course, Otis and Baby on the run, doing whatever they can to get to their location. And then they all end up meeting up together while they basically are holding a traveling band hostage.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the cool thing I like about with Rob Zombie, because he's such a a person who's all about old school movies and like horror movies and actors and stuff like that. A lot of these actors that have like come out of kind of retirement or something I haven't seen for a while. It's a lot bringing like those late 60s and early 70s actors. Obviously in the very beginning of the movie, you see Spaulding having sex with Ginger Lynn, Ginger Lynn's character, and like all of a sudden, she kind of puts a gun to his face and shoots him, and he wakes up, and then all of a sudden, he's with his actual girlfriend, or who's like a big heavy slob versus like with Ginger Lynn, and then like you said, whenever he goes and tries to steal the car from the mom and the little kid, the mom is PJ Souls, who's from Halloween.
Yep.
So you have all that, and then like you said, you get into this traveling banjo, Banjo and Sullivan band, and yeah, you got some iconic actors and actresses in this scene.
Yep.
You have the girl from Three's Company that's in it. You got Julia Lewis's father is in it. You got what the heck is his name now? Lou Temple's in this
Oh yeah,
movie.
Lou Temple as Adam,
Yeah,
and then Kate Norby, who's Wendy.
yeah. So yeah, it's like you got these guys who was iconic, and like for the longest time, I remember seeing this movie, and I remember seeing the Juliet's dad, and not never realized I knew they were the last name, and didn't realize it until he passed away that
Yeah.
was actually Julia Lewis's dad. I'm like, oh shit, like I knew they had the same name, but Lewis is a very common last name, so I didn't realize that
And I've seen Jeff
Banjo
in
and
so
Sullivan was.
many things over the
Oh
years,
yeah,
just between Devil's Rejects and The New Guy, which is one of my very favorite comedy movies ever. Like,
yeah.
and that's just two, so we don't get off track. But Jeff is, you want to talk established? I mean, Jeff is established.
Yeah, yeah. And then it goes into them having their fun at this hotel, which is kind of funny because that hotel location was actually made brought back throughout another horror movie, which a lot of people probably despise. It's such a weird movie, but the tire movie, that's where they filmed a lot of that movie at that same location that Devil's Rejects in, which is kind of funny because as a side note, because yeah, a lot of people about a killer tire, you can go, yeah, you thought our Easter movie was bad, but maybe we'll
Yeah.
have to do a tire episode.
Yeah, seriously.
But anyway,
We'll
yeah,
do a Cars episode.
yeah,
The good and
but
the bad.
yeah, but anyway, yeah, it's just
Against the tire.
yeah, yeah, I just love the the whole when it gets into this hotels, the playfulness and the absolute brutalness of this movie. They kill the guy straight up. His girlfriend's in the shower and they're like, get her out of the shower. Baby's playing with them all the time. And anytime you get to see Sherry Moon's butt throughout this movie multiple times in this movie, I was always pleased for that. I'm glad that in the early days of
But you
Sherry
get
Moon
Sherry-
that she was with
Oh,
that.
sorry. I was going to say, but brother, you get Sherry Moon boob action in the House of a Thousand Corpses.
Yeah, that's what I said. I'm glad in these early movies that he was him and her were both willing to allow us a little peek into the wonderful
We get to see into the bedroom a little bit. But no, totally, brother. And I mean, it's crazy with like that kind of stuff too. And again, that's again some of the great one-liners where you've got Bill Moseley, where originally he's accusing Sullivan of eyeballing his sister in dirty ways, and of course he's like, no, I would never do such a thing. And Bill's like, and he's like, why? He's like, my sister's hot, dude. Like,
yeah.
why do you feel that way? And it's like, it's so awkward, but it's so great at the same time. And that kind of leads also into what I feel to be one of the most like epic one-liners that he did in that movie is when he leaves with Banjo and Sullivan, because he basically leaves the girls with Baby and he takes those guys out to like a portion of the desert to dig up weapons that he had like basically buried for a rainy day. And after the guys try to flip on him and try to attack him, and Otis gets the upper hand and kills one of them. He's beaten Banjo, and he's basically saying, look, this is, I'm Willy fucking Wonka, this is my chocolate factory. And I'm just like, dude, that line is so awesome. And there's also a scene when Banjo's trying to like kind of beg for his life, and he's like, look, bro, the next words out of your mouth better be some brilliant Mark Twain shit, because it's totally getting chiseled on your tombstone. Bill is just so good. He's really sharp. And again, Rob is very much in tune with Bill. And I'm sure there's some writing in Rob's script of where he's like, I've got this idea, especially being a musician, writing songs. He's going to have a thing for words and wordplay. So I'm sure that Rob does get a certain amount of credit for some of these lines in The Devil's Rejects, but Bill's execution of these lines just make them stick with you.
Yeah. I mean, especially just in that short period of time, like you said, from when they get to the hotel to when they're digging he's out there with the boys digging the gun. Like you said, those iconic lines like that. I'm the devil. I'm here to do the devil's work.
Yeah.
And then my favorite line in the whole entire movie is that scene where like right before they go out to dig the guns, when he was talking about, why are you eyeballing my sister and all that crap like that. And then, he goes and has a little fun with his wife, and he's sticking his gun in her Netherland regions. And when they're out, he was like walking around, he's like, man, I could still smell your wife's pussy juice on my gun. I hope it doesn't rust it. Like that was probably my favorite one, because it was just like, oh my god, did they really go there? As far as like that, like, oh my, I was like, yeah, but yeah, just the fun that you can tell that Bill was just thinking, or even like I said, if those lines could have been written, it was like what would a person who's just diabolically evil say, but trying to say it in a funny, witty way? And that's like, yeah, like you said, like the next thing you say better be some, shit, Mark Twain shit and stuff like that throughout this movie. Even just the little nuances. When they're driving around later on in the movie and they're like, baby Otis and Spalding are in the car, and they're like, she sees a sign for ice cream, and she's
Yeah,
like, I want some ice cream, and he's like, yeah, yeah, there's no fucking ice cream in your future, whatever, and you're like, oh, whatever, and then all of a sudden, like, you see like seconds later they're licking ice cream, and they're like, tutti fucking fruity, and
yeah,
it's just like the rapport that those three actors had. I feel like, like I said, I feel like Rob had some of that scripted, but I
yeah,
also feel like a lot of that was just those guys who have done that character for so long, and done the, with the House of Thousand Corpses, and coming back with it in this movie, where it was like they kind of know where each other's character kind of runs, so they can play off each other really, really well. So yeah, it was just that, that camaraderie, and that, but it's like camaraderie in a weird way, because they're completely maniacal killers, like they're completely insane, but they're not like insane completely, because they know what they're doing. They're like, and
yeah.
they're all intelligent, but
Mhm.
it's more like not really book smart, they're like street smart.
But there's also that little semblance in that same ice cream scene where there's actually a little semblance of humanity to it, because like after they've got the ice cream and Spalding and Baby are eating it, Baby looks at Otis and gives him this kind of like compassionate look. He's like, "Look, I really don't understand why you got to be such a grump. This is really good. Have some."
Yeah.
And he's just, cranky and doesn't want it. Ends up getting like, she boops him in the nose with the ice cream and stuff like that,
Yeah.
at him and stuff. So there's that little bit of like just camaraderie, that little bit of just like, family love and like compassion and companionship and stuff like that. But again, 100% what you said. These guys, this is a car being driven by a bunch of just stone cold murderers. But there are those just subtleties of like humanity and love for each other that does kind of come through. And it leads us towards part of our climax of the movie where they end up shacking up with, Spalding's brother, or like half brother, or whoever it is, because it's not giving anything away, because the Fangs are all going to see it in the movie, is that they're meeting up with Charlie, who's Spalding's brother, but Spalding's white, Charlie's very black. So it's just kind of whatever the family ties are with this. But they're shacking up in his whorehouse, and it also kind of leads to their inevitable busting, where Charlie is known in the area, and the police know who he is, know what he does, which is fine, but also know who he's related to. So when everything came to a head, and they're out manhunting for the Firefly family, then they know that by kind of cornering Charlie, they're like, "Look, man, we know what you do, and while we're kind of cool with it, it's still against the law, so we've got you regardless.
Yeah.
But we're going to give you the opportunity to give them up, or we're going to take everything from you," which ultimately Charlie does give them up.
Yeah, yeah, and like I said, and then you get right in, like you were talking before, with these iconic actors that Rob puts in this movie. Right into that, you have Charlie, who is Ken Foree from the Dawn of the Dead and all the movies that he's done. And then, obviously in the whorehouse is E.G. Daily from Pee Wee's Playhouse, but she's also done, Pee Wee's Big Adventure, but she also did like voices for so many cartoons. She was a Powerpuff Girl. She was
Call me
a uh,
Pickles.
Pickles from Rugrats and stuff like that. And then, uh, you know, Charlie's right hand man is a guy that we've talked about many times on this thing, Michael Berryman. And
Yep.
Michael Berryman is no chicken fucker. Apparently, he does not fuck chickens. Even though that guy implied that he cuts off the head of the chicken, sticks his dingling in the headless chicken, and when it goes, he goes. But then, yeah, you have the sheriff that that we were talking about, that is the brother of the sheriff from the original one, and he's hell bent on trying to find these the Devil's Rejects, the Firefly family, and he's sends out two mad dog killers to track them. I think they were like they called them the Gruesome Two or something like that. There was their nicknames, but and obviously the horror fanatics are gonna know him as Danny Trejo
The
from
Unholy Two.
The Unholy Two. That's what it is, yeah. And obviously everyone's gonna know Danny Trejo from Machete and all the Dust Till Dawn, all the Quentin Tarantino, Robert Rodriguez movies, and then his brother in this is everybody might know as DDP, Self High Five, bang, from wrestling, WCW, and his stint a little bit in WWF, but mainly he was bigger in WCW, I believe.
Yeah, definitely. But he is a
But yeah,
WWE Hall of Famer.
Yep. But yeah, you have these two that are going after him, and like you said, the sheriff is trying to find all the information that he can, and it leads into a scene that you were talking about that I'll let you talk about with between him and Mother Firefly, which is probably hands down top three scenes of this movie. Like that interaction between that is insane.
That interaction is so good because Mother Firefly's not giving up anything, and I think to a certain degree she kind of knows she's not leaving that jail. But like in typical Firefly fashion, they're just smartasses to like the upteenth degree because like she's basically being like interrogated, and Sheriff Wydell is trying to like get her to talk and give up the family, and where would they go and what would they do, and she's just not giving him anything. But then she turns on that Firefly smartassness, and she's like, you know what, you look awfully familiar, and I remember when we were living at home and this guy came by, and you know what, to ask us questions, and you know what, I think his name was also Wydell. Was he kin to you? Which, if anybody's seen The House of a Thousand Corpses, that was the sheriff. That his brother was the sheriff before he took over, and Mother Firefly blew his head off with a gun, and so that whole like fucking with him by reminding him that she killed his brother is just so crazy. It's so sick and sadistic, but it's so Firefly. It's just exactly what would happen. But this guy, also being the capital alcoholic that he is not going to take that. And he's like, fine, you want to play this game? I'm going to teach you something. I'm going to let you know fear, and I'm going to, I'm going to stick it to you. Key words being stick it. And pushes her up against the wall, ends up stabbing her to death.
Yeah, between that scene and my other favorite scene with the sheriff is when they're trying to figure out where they can try to track down the Firefly family, and they find out that all these names have to do with the Marx Brothers movies and stuff like that. And they bring in a guy that's apparently this huge dude that's all about that. He's saying all this stuff about like the Marx Brothers and this and that and that. He's saying all these little scenes. Did you know? He's like one of those guys that like that knows everything and goes, oh, well, did you know this? Oh, well, did you know that this happened? And he's like, yeah. He was like, well, is he still? Maybe we can find him, and is he still alive? And they're like, that's the problem. It was all because of that freaking gyrating, musician. And he was like, what are you talking about? He's like, that goddamn Elvis Presley. And then all of a sudden he's like, don't you ever say anything about bad about the king, I
Yeah.
just love that scene because it's like he's like, we don't give a fuck about you and the Marx Brothers, man. You're not allowed to say anything about Elvis. He's like, do not say anything about Elvis Aaron Presley in my presence.
Yeah, seriously. It throws the dude out on his ass, and he's like, "Fuck Groucho Marx."
Yeah.
No, it's another just great scene because it's like that little thing, They realize that these are references to like the Marx Brothers. All the names match, all the names fit, and that's what brings this guy in. They're like, well, maybe we need to know more, so bring in this movie critic guy who's just kind of his own goofy, obsessed wacko in his own right, and obviously that doesn't go well when he puts his foot in his mouth. But then bringing it around towards the conclusion of the movie where the unholy two, due to Charlie selling out the family, find the family. And I will say, one of my other favorite one-liners in this movie that didn't come from Otis is actually from Charlie, where Charlie and Spaulding are doing coke, and Charlie has to leave the room, and he's like, "Do me a favor, man. I'll be right back because I got to take a piss. Don't be snorting up all my cocaine because you got a nose like a vacuum cleaner." And Spaulding's like, "Oh, man, would I ever do that to you?" And Charlie's like, "Nah, man. You're my brother, and I love you. But I love my cocaine better. Fuck you." And he just takes it with him. And Spaulding's just like, "Oh, man, that's cold-blooded." Like, and it's just one of those things, too, where it's like, it's kind of an epic scene of getting busted because you've got Baby just kind of doing her thing in her room. Otis is literally getting laid, and Spaulding is all kind of fucked up on like weed and coke and alcohol when like the bounty hunters come in and bust all of them. So they're all literally in compromising positions, getting thrown through windows and fucked up and stuff. But no, they're basically busted by the bounty hunters, tied up and left in a shed for Sheriff Wydell to basically start torturing them.
Yeah. It's actually he actually brings them back to the Firefly house,
Yep.
which I guess ultimately it was his biggest mistake because bringing them to the house and torturing them and leaving them to die, with Otis and Spaulding nailed to a chair while the house is on fire, and he kind of does this. The sheriff starts doing, starts lets Baby run, and she starts running away, and it kind of brings back sort of a scene from the original one where he's calling her a rabbit. And obviously in House of Thousand Corpses they had the girls that they were chasing. They kept on going, "Run, rabbit, run!" So it's kind of like bringing that back in circle, where now instead of Baby being the killer, now she's the victim. Now she's becoming the victim of this crazy sheriff that's just basically said, "I don't give a fuck, I need to revenge my brother regardless of whatever, and this world needs to we need to end this world of the Fireflies and all that stuff like that." Which ultimately he starts toying around with her, and just like in any movie, when you toy around with somebody instead of just killing them, it usually doesn't work very well to you. And all of a sudden, they forgot about Tiny. He comes and snaps his neck and twists his neck around like 45 times, it looks like. And obviously lets Otis and Spaulding out from the nails that were driven into there, and they get out, and the house is on fire. And he was like, they're like, "Hey man, you want to go with us?" And Tiny's like, he's like, "Oh, we'll come back and get you." And then ultimately Tiny decides, that the family's dead. These guys are getting ready to die. They look like they're almost two sheets to the wind dead anyway because they've been tortured and dying. So he just decides to sacrifice himself and walks into the burning Firefly house.
Yep, no, 100%, man. And that leads us to our closing scene, which is actually pretty epic in its own right, which literally you just kind of assume that it's the rejects just riding off into the sunset. to get into whatever adventures they get into, whether that's the end of the movie, period, or the end of that movie leading towards what might have been a sequel, which turns out that we did get a third installment, which we'll save for another day, but it is called Three from Hell. But as they're driving, they suddenly realize there is a full on roadblock of, police just waiting for them. And in typical, Firefly fashion, they literally look at each other and they're just like, you know what? Fuck. It's just the end. So we might as well just go out in a blaze of glory, which is basically them all taking guns, driving at full speed towards the cops, and just shooting at them while they're just getting lit up with ammunition. To, of all things, Freebird.
Yeah.
For the scene. And then the movie fades to black, and you just hear nothing but gunshots and car crashes, and it's left up to your imagination.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those ones like, like you said with Leonard Skinner, being in that, and Rob being such a huge fan of the 70s and 70s actors and 70s movies and now 70s music, it's funny to me, I've never been a huge fan of Leonard Skinner, but I kind of funny that the two songs that I enjoy the most are from movies. You have the Tuesday's Gone from Happy Gilmore that
Yep.
I always think of, and Freebird before Devil's Rejects. Yeah, I mean, Freebird was all right. It was okay. But now after seeing the ending of Devil's Rejects, it just that makes it perfect. Now every time I hear Freebird, I just think of the ending where they were just like, fuck it, let's just go out in a blaze of glory, and yeah, they just get blown to freaking pieces, and
Yeah.
you kind of figured it was the end of the movie, but spoiler alert, it wasn't.
Yep. Nope. 100%. And right before we get into the obituaries for this, my friend, because it is that time, I do think it's a little apropos for us, again, being that we're so into this kind of stuff, but to give a little tip of our hats to to Spalding, to Tiny, to Sullivan, to Sid Haig, to Matthew McGrory, and to Jeffrey Lewis, who those three are no longer with us, but have left just such a cool legacy of their films behind and stuff like that. So, anybody that we're leaving out from that movie that might have passed as well, 100% we acknowledge them, and don't take it personally, Fangs. We're just putting light on those three specific characters because they were so big to the franchise in that specific movie. So, blessings, to Sid Haig, to Michael McGrory, and to Jeffrey Lewis, for their bodies of work, and, our love to their families as well. But let's get into the obituaries, of course, and where we find the Devil's Rejects to be. For me, this is and always has been a very high-ranking movie for me. I think it's excellent. I think its rewatchability is on a very high-level scale. I find myself watching this movie many times a year, and never having any issues or lack of enjoyment when I watch it. It's got such an amazing cast built off the old school, which I think is very cool. Again, we've spoken about Rob's love affair of that multiple times, but its cast is incredibly solid. The way the cast works off of each other, I think, is really, really stellar. And the thing I also really do love about this movie that I do find ranks it, in my opinion, a little higher than Texas Chainsaw, which I'll get into, is the fact that this movie, in my opinion, has a very strong ability to be a standalone movie. I feel Rob could have done this movie without House of a Thousand Corpses, and it would still be successful and still be heavily enjoyed as just its own thing. Sure, they would have to tweak certain things. Like, you couldn't have Mother Firefly referencing Sheriff Wydell's brother when nobody would have a clue what she's talking about for that. You could probably figure it out, but nobody would have a clue what she's talking about. So there's certain tweaks, of course, that they would do, but I do find that Devil's Rejects has a very strong case as a standalone movie, which gives it a high ranking in my eyes when it comes to this kind of stuff. But like I said, for me, I've always held this movie in high regard. I love it. I watch it many times a year, and I just think it's excellent. This movie is a very strong 9 for me.
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of funny too because you were talking about it being, being a movie where it could be a standalone movie and stuff like that. Where Sherry Moon has been very boisterous that she
Yeah.
never really considered this movie being a sequel. She just
Yeah.
considers it its own movie that just happens to have characters that were from another movie. So which plays it both ways because like I said, even when you try to do it as we're gonna do it as a sequel and stuff like that, where like better sequels, it's like yeah, I mean it theoretically is a sequel, but like then again it can be considered not a sequel. It can be considered a completely movie, which is the same to go with House and the same to go with Three from Hell, even
Absolutely.
though even though Three from Hell is a little bit more of a continuation from Devil's Rejects, but like it's still all three of them are very standalone movies. But yeah, I mean, like I said, I mean this movie, like you said, I probably watched Devil's Rejects more times than I probably care to admit. I've probably watched it so many times, and it's fun too because when you watch it, even though I've seen it 9 billion times, you catch the little things that you
Yes.
didn't see the first time or stuff like that. And it's such an iconic movie just because of the fact that it pays homage to those older movies. It is a very inspired by Texas Chainsaw and parts of Texas Chainsaw 2 that we talked about. Like I said, and it's got a little bit of like that little bit of Western to it. It's a little bit of a Bonnie and Clyde kind of movie as well too, where it's like, it's a getaway movie. It's an action packed cop movie or anything like that. So it's such a crazy movie as far as that was because it could be obviously it's a horror movie because there's a lot of horror elements into it and a lot of killings, a lot of blood, and a lot of that kind of stuff. But yeah, you can put it in as an action movie. You can put it in as a drama almost or a thriller kind of too. So yeah, it's it's definitely high up on there. As probably a movie that's high regards and where I probably don't want to rank it nearly as high as a 9,
Sure.
but then again, it's kind of weird too because it's kind of like I definitely would put it, as an 8 or an 8.5 or even to a 9 too. But I kind of feel like it's kind of funny because when we do when once we figure out the actual stamp against it, I kind of feel like it's funny because obviously with Texas Chainsaw Massacre we did an 8. So for us to go with an 8 for this movie, I would have to rank Devil's Rejects a 7, which in no way Devil's Rejects is getting a 7 from me. So I mean, there's it's just no fair, no, there's no way in hell that I would ever say that Devil's Rejects is a 7.0 movie out of 10. But I kind of find it feel it's funny because, like I said, I'm probably gonna give it that 8 or an 8.5 maybe. But
Yeah.
I kind of feel like Rob would probably yell at us and say that there's no way in hell that Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 should lose to Devil's Rejects
I
because
know.
without Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, there more than likely wouldn't be Devil's Rejects. Since like I said, not saying copied, but he just used a lot of the references from that movie and other movies. His movies have always been, like I said, that homage to those 70s and 60s cult films and stuff like that. So it's like no, it's no way I'm saying that Rob stole. But even like when you go to the Firefly house and it's got the circles around it, looks exactly like the driveway when you go into the Texas Chainsaw House. The fact that the families are very similar. You can definitely tell that Rob was inspired by Texas Chainsaw Massacre series plus other with other movies when he came up with even with House. He came up with House Thousand Corpses and the characters. He definitely used those as reference. So it's like I think it's kind of funny because, like I said, I'm definitely gonna go. I'm definitely gonna go with an 8.5 as far as where I think it is. But like I said, I think Rob would probably yell at us because, in his opinion, that the Devil's Reject should not beat Texas Chainsaw 2.
So no problem and totally understandable. And I do think there's some rights to this. And if you and I get the opportunity in the future to talk to Rob, that'll be a very interesting discussion to have that, I look forward to us having. So here's the thing. That's an 8.5 and a 9, respectively, for us. The Fangs all know that we don't do 0.25s and we don't do 0.27s. What I'm proposing for this, why don't we go with an 8.5 on this, where usually we have our little mini debate about which way to swing the needle. Why don't we go with the 8.5 on this one for that respect of it? Because this has probably been our closest one to date. And again, on two movies that weren't intentionally chosen that mirror each other so well. It just kind of worked out that way. But maybe with a little bit of respect to Rob Zombie, while obviously the Devil's Rejects is getting the victory in this, and it's going to be a fatality to Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, the respect of making the difference of only a half a point feels like the right thing to do. So what do you think, Devil? An 8.5?
Yeah, I think we do it at 8.5, but I think whenever we post it, instead of fatality, I might do friendship or something like that. Because
Pug.
I kind of, yeah, because I kind of, like whenever, when you're, people who are familiar with the Mortal Kombat, you have the fatalities and you have the friendships and you got the babalities and all that crazy stuff they added to it. So I kind of feel like I said, as a respect for not only for Rob winning it, but because of his love for Texas Chainsaw, maybe we just do it, you know, Devil's Rejects wins over Texas Chainsaw Massacre friendship.
No, I can definitely see you on that one, brother, and I think that's definitely a good one for it. So Fangs, that's the way it's going to be. We're going to lock it in. That is an 8.5 for Devil's Rejects. That gives victory to the vampire, an 8.5 Devil's Rejects over Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 in our better sequels showdown. So we're going to call this a friendly fatality in victory for the Devil's Rejects. So that's the way it's going to be, Fangs, and there it shall be. Horns up, Fangs out. It was the Devil's Rejects tonight.
Hey kiddos, it's the Devil here with another quick movie review. Just got done watching the 2024 vampire horror movie Abigail. Have you checked it out yet? It's pretty cool. It's got all the things I like. Blood, guts, decapitations, a crazy little girl killing people. It's pretty cool. It's got a cool concept, and it's like new school, old school, and I love it. It was an awesome movie. You should go check it out, because if you don't, the devil and maybe Abigail might come and see you.
We've got interesting discussions that must happen right now. It's baseball season. People are familiar with the word strike. But Devil, I feel like we need to get our balls in check of a certain massive size on this episode of Vampire and Devil. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh yeah, just like they said in Grease 2, we're gonna score tonight. We're gonna talk about bowling. Oh yeah, we're gonna take old Bundy out there and go a strike.
Yeah, man. And so, first and foremost, if you like nudity, you are in for a treat. This movie is for you. Will the nudity add to the end? Will add to any of the potential scores? Don't know if I can necessarily say that will help, but it's right up in your face.
Oh yeah, we're gonna talk about the 2008 GutterBalls, and yeah, this movie apparently he was asked the director Ryan was asked to shave off over 20, 30 minutes of this movie just to make it an NC-17. And he was like, fuck no, I'm going to make this movie unrated. And yes, when you first start off this movie, it talks about there's some bowling action going on, and you see a girl bowling, and she bends over, and yes, you see all of her glory. You see lips and all. You can tell what she ate for breakfast because
Yeah.
you're basically right there up in the old gooch.
Dude, it's crazy, man, with that. I mean, look, don't get me wrong. Like, we are not prudes. Like, vampires and devils, we are not prudes, dude. We are down for everything. But I will say, when it comes to conversations about cinema, I wouldn't go so far as to call it shocking because nothing's going to get us. But the idea of something like that being right up in your face, right off the bat, is hilarious. It
Yeah.
kind of reminds me of, a movie that I know we'll discuss in the future more in depth in Thanksgiving, which all of a sudden you get a pair of capital knockers right up in your face incredibly fast in the movie. But anyway, yeah, when it comes to Gutterballs, Ryan, God rest his soul, passed away in 2019 of brain cancer. So our thoughts and wishes still are out to his family. But that dude had no shame and was not afraid to push the boundaries. And another thing that's always important to remind the Fangs or even just let them know is that this guy's pedigree of special effects work was psychotic. Like, people are going to think Tom Savini, but Ryan Nicholson's right up on his heels.
Oh yeah, man. This dude, if you look on IMDb, his credits for makeup and special effects movies are over 130 something movies, and not just within the horror genre. I'm talking about horror, action, sci-fi, drama, comedy. I mean, and you see even some of those movies, like not off the I can't remember off the top of my hand, but some of those ones I was like, holy shit, like he did makeup for this movie, like big motion picture movies, like huge movies. I'm
He did
like,
makeup
geez.
Dreamcatcher, which was always a favorite of mine.
Yeah, like some of the movies that I'm like, holy shit, man, that's pretty sick, and and then especially delving when you get into this movie with like his lucrative special effects career, and then you get into this movie and you're like, really, like, and the special effects in this movie are awesome, and by
Yes.
they're awesome, and the gore in this movie, but just the campiness and the overall kind of script. I'm 100% believing that 99.9% of this movie is not scripted at all.
Yeah.
I feel like they were just like, hey, just say whatever you want to, because these guys are like just going off on each other the whole entire time. There's a lot of bantering back and forth that sometimes doesn't make any sense whatsoever. That kind of feels like you would do something if you were improving a little bit. There is warning in this movie that if you are offended by nudity, like we said to begin with, yeah, definitely don't watch this movie. If you're offended by the lots of lewd and crude vulgar language, it's off of this movie's got a lot of things to offend you.
Yeah. And that's the thing too, is like the fact of the matter is movies, it's fantasy. Like, of course there's documentaries. Of course there's biopics. Of course there's stuff like that that is rooted in truth and fact. But when it comes to just overall genres and movies as movies, it's fantasy. That's how it's designed. Some people want to do different, have different takes on things, maybe their style and stuff like that. Like, we've talked regularly about like the Terrifier movies have been definitely raising the bar when it comes to vulgarity, bloodlust, and all that kind of stuff. And Gutterballs is right up in that alley. But that's the other thing that, just like you said, Devil, is like that's what's important for people to remember is the fact that, like, look, it's a movie, it's fantasy. We do not condone, discrimination or judgment of people's lifestyles. But at the same time, keep in mind we don't back cancel culture either. I don't believe in canceling out somebody for a tweet they did 20 years ago when they were drunk for the first time. Like, but that's just the important thing. We don't want to get on our soapboxes. We're not a political show, but that's just the thing to keep in mind, Fangs. These are movies. They're meant to be fun. They're made to put to kind of fuck with your sensibilities a little bit, and they're meant to, push the boundaries. And GutterBalls definitely does that. Whether it's the vertical smile right up on your screen, or a shotgun blast heard around the world.
Yeah, yeah, especially with, like I said, with this movie. I mean, this movie was, definitely pushing boundaries, definitely pushing what is, entertainment and what is just in, craziness. And yeah, and with this movie is no exception. I mean, you get right into this movie where, the characters are all going bowling. You have the good people who are all there, and then you have like the bad asshole kind of jockey, sort of like, I think they were all supposed to be in high school, but like the high schoolish or college kind of jock assholes and stuff like that, which those guys are all like, a bunch of douchebags pretty much throughout this movie. And, they're bantering, they're fighting and stuff like that. One girl decides that they're getting ready to leave. She leaves her purse. She comes inside. When she comes inside, the four jockey guys are all still there. And they do a pretty long number on her. It's a pretty extensive and violent and pretty graphic rape scene where each
Yeah.
one of them are kind of taking turns. And yeah, I mean, is the director trying to glorify any of that stuff? No, I think it's part of just the making it seem uneasy and to watch. It's kind of, that's that shock value. I mean, obviously the actress that was in this movie, I would imagine 100% consented to everything that was in the movie. And obviously these guys are not trying to physically hurt her or rape her in real life. So again, it's people got to realize that these are characters and these are actors and these are actresses. And yeah, even though they are doing something that's horrific, doesn't necessarily mean that these guys are really that horrible. And I always put it, when we talk about stuff like that, there is that fine line between art and reality. And some people can't can't walk that line. I always talk about where, even though it has nothing to do with this, I always talk about the kid who played Joffrey in the Game of Thrones movie, who is considered one of the worst characters. And worse, I mean, as far as how horrible his character is, that people hated him so much for all the bad shit that he did in Game of Thrones, that actor was getting death threats and eventually quit acting because people were literally sending him mail and sending voicemails and stuff like that of how much they hated him and how horrible a character, which is what you want. If you want a bad guy, you want to hate them. So these guys in this movie, you want to hate these guys. You're rooting for these guys throughout this movie to be killed. And that's what I said. It's like these people that don't realize that, this isn't a documentary. This isn't a snuff film. This stuff didn't, I mean, even though some of the stuff in this movie is real, like you see a lot of nudity in this movie, and it's flat out real nudity in this movie. Like the scenes of what happens between that is not real. It's not reality. So, but yeah, I mean, but like, yeah, it is a tough scene to watch. Even watching it again, I love this movie, and I love the fact that this movie is, you can put this in the realm of your torture slash revenge kind of film. And yeah, I love this movie, and like I said, I love the goriness and the graphicness of this. But yeah, that scene is, a good 10-15 minutes, and it is tough to watch because I mean they're brutally taking, no exceptions to this girl. I mean, just all kinds of crazy stuff, which then ends with them shoving basically a bowling pin inside of her.
Yeah.
And then comes where you find out this is really a movie. The next day she's wearing sunglasses and she's not in a good mood, but
Yeah.
after all the shit that happened to her, she would be in the hospital for
Oh yeah.
months and months and months with not even just mental the mental stuff that she went through, just the physical stuff that she went through. She'd be in a hospital for a while recuperating, which is the next day
Yeah.
that she's completely all right. Even the fight scene, they're beating the shit out of the one jock, and he's got his face all mangled and bruised, and his eyes all popped up, and it's gnarly looking. It looks real. It looks like the dude really got his ass kicked. And then the next day, when they show up, other than a cast on his foot, his face is completely fine again.
Absolutely. And that's the thing too, is like with this movie, this is 100% a movie where you are rooting for the villain. Like you are just down for the cause of all these cats, like just getting what's coming to them. The thing is this is obviously just an updated, gorier, frankly, no pun intended, but ballsier version of I Spit on Your Grave.
Yeah.
You know, the whole movie of I Spit on Your Grave is based around a rape again and the revenge that the female, you know, plots because of it. You know, where the time frame of that actually makes sense. No discredit to GutterBalls, but it doesn't make any sense because you were completely right on the reality of that particular situation. Where, and I Spit on Your Grave, it's a year later. You know, she has this stuff happen to her. She's left for dead. She survives. She plots. Well, she heals. The scars are there. She plots. She comes across these people again, and she takes matters into her own hands. It's very much that exact same thing here. It's just a little less realistic with the fact that you just wouldn't be able, no matter how mad you were at the situation, you're not immediately going to be able to turn it around for your revenge sequence. You're going to need at least a minimal moment to think it through, let things settle, and go from there. Versus this is just such a quick turnaround of like, you know what, all you motherfuckers are dead. Which, don't get me wrong, I'm all for that because that is 100% the people that I want to be gone all the time very quickly. You know, so while this movie is on such an epic level of gore and violence, as far as the message being sent, dude, Vampire approved.
Yeah. I mean, the gore in this movie is awesome. I mean, even from the beginning kills all the way throughout the entire end of the movie. I mean, the kills in this movie are awesome. One of my favorite ones of the kills is the I call it death by 69ing.
Yeah.
Basically, the bad guy brings a bunch of girls with him, and they're going, and everybody's all smoozing each other, and this girl's just basically just batting for whatever team wants to bat for, and she decides to, they're gonna have a little fun, and she starts, going down on them, and they're 69, and then all of a sudden the killer comes up and basically makes, sticks her, throat down there, the ding dong down the throat, and basically kills her that way. And then she's freaking out and dying because she's suffocating and she's biting, and he's like, "Oh my God, you're biting me! Come on, lady, like stop!" He's like, "What the hell? It's the worst head I've ever gotten. You're not supposed to use your teeth." And all of a sudden, he puts his head down and basically suffocates him with her cooch. So yeah, it's definitely I mean, I've seen some interesting kills when it comes to these horror movies with, when it comes to the sexual and stuff like that, where, couples are having sex, and then, like, Jason will stick a machete between the two of them and
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. But I never seen anyone ever be suffocated with, a ding dong and a coochie in the mouth at the same time. So that was pretty cool.
I'm definitely with you on that one. Like honestly, leading up to that scene, you could see it. You could see it coming. You knew what was going down. But I immediately went the direction, of course, like you said, of just like basically double impalement. I was like, either that or a person's going to come up for air and get lopped off or something like that, or like you said, Friday the 13th style, like just double impalement or something. Like I gotta give him credit. Like he thought outside the box when it came to that, where I immediately went traditional with how I thought the deaths of them were going to be. Ryan was like, no, you don't know what's really going to happen. And then you watch it and you're just kind of like, wow, double double suffocation, chowing down on the no bits of your partner. All right. Can't say that I've seen that one before.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's all crazy. You got the bowling ball that's kind of the bowling pin that's kind of sort of like a Michael Myers knife because it's got an edge that's being used and killed with people in this. You have the ball cleaner, death where he sticks his head in the ball cleaner and it basically gnarls up his face.
I was a big fan of that kill personally.
Yeah, that one was cool. You got heads getting lopped off. The only one I thought was kind of weird, which I kind of questioned. I get maybe the subtext of it, but you had the trans character that he kills, and then all of a sudden, after the the actor and the character is already dead, he decides to take off his dingling and then split it and cut it in half. And I'm like, okay, he's already dead, so I don't understand why you would do it. But then later on, when you see all the dead bodies kind of stacked up, I guess the way that the penis is split, it kind of looks like a vagina. So maybe he was making his, because of him being trans, making him into, that. But it was kind of like adding insult to injury already. The dude was already dead. So why do you need to bring out the penis and cut it in half? To begin with, I was just kind of like, okay, maybe this is, trying to push that edge and try to be that graphicness and craziness. But then, like, when you saw it at the end of the big picture, I'm like, maybe. But yeah, I mean, like I said, the kills in this movie are just insane. I love the fact that they're bowling and that they're all trying to bowl and be serious while all this craziness has all happened. And then you have the phantom bowler that's the BK killer all of a sudden keeps on getting these, like, what they like, they think are strikes, but they're, the skull and crossbones every time he kills a character. And they're like, damn, man, who the hell is this BK, man? He's beating the shit out of all of us.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, like when it came to like, the genital mutilation. I mean, it didn't ruin my good time. I didn't have a problem with it in the movie, but it did seem a little out of place, and it did. And this is a weird way to say it. This is a weird way to put it, but I can't really think of a different way to put it at the moment. But it did seem in bad taste. It did seem, even for the movie that Ryan was putting together, and again, it doesn't take away from my good time. This has nothing to do with my final score, but it seemed a little bit out of place. It seemed a little, I won't go so far as to say disrespectful, but it just seemed a little rude, because honestly, when it comes to that community, they've got their own certain struggles. Also, when it comes to the decision making of how they want to live the rest of their life. So I did personally find it to be a touch in bad taste. It fit in what the style of this movie is. It definitely does. But I will say, it does seem a touch in bad taste when you do, again, you understand that the movie's rooted in fantasy, but there's a member of a real life community. But again, for the fangs that are watching the movie, well, judge for yourself, guys. When it comes to opinions and the way things are, it's definitely, our word is not gospel. It is not stone. We're just giving our opinions based on what we see and what we think about it. But anyway, yeah, as far as the brutality of the kills, I'm definitely down for it. Usually I like a lot of my horror movies to be a little bit psychedelic, a little bit demonic, and like a little bit more like, just stabby when it comes to a lot of those type of kills and the way those things are done. I have as much bloodlust and horror as the next person does, but I don't find that I find myself to be overly lusty as something I need in the movies. I love the Saw movies for what they do and what they represent, but I don't, the bloodlust just kind of comes as part of the deal. I I think you could cut away a lot of the blood of those movies and I would still absolutely enjoy them. But there is a certain amount of just necessity that comes in the gallons of blood that get lost in a Saw movie. So anyway, when it comes to this, I mean, I enjoy the bloodlusty nature of it. It's cool. You know, you don't get a lot of, you know, excessive, you know, blood movies that don't also come across as just like, three out of 10 Rotten Tail style. You know, you a lot of times when there's just crazy blood, it's literally it's literally just small dick syndrome. They're just covering up for something, you know. But it worked for the story, it worked for the style, and again, Ryan of all people has a background and a knowledge of that. So at the same time, you know, I can't knock him for taking advantage of a skill set he absolutely has, or in this case had.
Yeah, yeah, and like I said, when they're coming to the script of this movie and stuff like that, or the non-script of this movie, yeah, the bannering in this movie is just funny. I mean, even though
Yeah.
these guys are assholes and they're saying asshole like shit, sometimes they there's some shit that's funny. My favorite part of the whole entire movie when you got the guy who was the major asshole that's flopping around on the crutches, and he's trying to find his one buddy, and they're going behind where the bowling ball pins reset and stuff like that, and he sees this dude laying there, and he's like, hey man, what the fuck you doing back here, kind of shit. And all of a sudden, he goes to the dude, and the dude doesn't have a head, and he's like, where the fuck your head at? Like, just the way he said it was just like, almost to me, it was like, I couldn't imagine that being scripted. It was just like literally like something he just said out of his mind. But yeah,
Just
and the
improv.
crazy thing, yeah, the crazy thing about this movie too, like we were talking about all the nudity, and you got all these actresses that obviously, like I said, you know, obviously knew that what role they were playing were going to be nudity. Every girl in this entire movie, other than the girl that we will talk about, that's kind of the heroine of the movie, or the final girl sort of this movie, all of them have or were just very slutty,
Yeah.
very openly showing a lot of skin, a lot of titties. And the crazy thing about this movie is if you look at all these girls that were in this movie, this is pretty much the only movie they've ever done. A couple of them have done maybe one other movie, and it was like no other movie. So it's like, yeah,
There's so many empty, like, photos on IMDb. Like when
yeah.
you look at the cast, there's usually like a headshot or a scene shot or something of the actors that are playing. There's so many just empty photo frames for the
Yeah,
cast.
so I think it's
cast
kind of
is-
funny when you come to that and like, well, yeah, you're having kids and you're 30 years later and you're like, well, mom, what did you do when you were in your 20s? Well, I wrote this movie about a killer maniac and then GutterBalls, and I showed my titties, and that was
Devil,
pretty much
it
all.
reminds
That
me
was the
so
extent.
much. Oh, sorry, buddy. Real quick, Devil. It reminds me so much of that scene in Zack and Mary Make a Porno when Zack and Mary are in the strip club, literally just talking to the strippers about what they would be down to do in a movie like that.
Yeah, which is kind of funny though, because you talk about Zack and Mary, but the my favorite part of that movie, whenever they're getting ready to make the movie, you have the girl that comes out and basically gets naked in front of Craig T. Robinson, and he's like, oh my god, I love that job. Funny fact is, I actually know that girl.
Do you really?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. She's a girl that lives outside of Pittsburgh, so we kind of know her. Like, my one friend kind of knows them, but yeah, I just think it's kind of funny, and it kind of reminds me of like this movie where it was like, yeah, your whole. So what's my motivation? Your motivation is, especially with the Death by 69. You're kind of a dumb blonde that just likes having sex. Oh, okay. And that's pretty much what those two girls that he brings are, definitely like your stereotypical, like, airheaded bimbos in
Yeah.
this movie. But it's kind of funny though, because it's like, you got these kind of actors that do these kind of movies, and then all of a sudden you see like, oh my God, she's like, this CEO of like some huge franchise now, or some like big huge like lawyer or something like that. But yeah, these guys are like literally that's all they've done was just this movie, and they're like, yeah. So it's like it's nice. It's like, well, yeah. So yeah, especially with the girl that we talked about in the beginning that kind of catalyst this movie with her, being raped by the guys. Yeah, like I said, the cooch is right up in the front, and like I think she did one other movie, so it's like. And the other movie that I think she did looks like it might have some nudity probably in it too. So it was like, it's like, okay, we're gonna make this movie. Okay, I have friends of mine. That's what it kind of reminds me. This movie reminds me of something like Clerks, where Kevin Smith made it with friends, but instead of like, just talking about clerky stuff, we're gonna have like a killer and a bowling alley, and it's like, hey, you want to be in this movie? Sure. Are you okay with showing your cooch in the first 2 seconds in the movie? Fuck yeah, let's do it. It's like, but yeah, I mean, that's I said, that's like, yeah, and I love it. I love it. Like I said, it's one of those ones I remember when I watched it, like we were talking about with that scene. We were like, I had to rewind back. I'm like, did I just see what I thought I saw? And then like throughout this movie, like, it brought back those, even though those 80s horror movies that were all about nudity and you had the nudity in it, and, that beginning scene was a little more extreme, but then later on, when you keep seeing the tits and stuff like that, it kind of had that throwback to those old, like, Friday the 13th movies and stuff like that. Cause, you gotta have like I think they said if you have boobs every like 6 or 7 minutes in a horror film or something like that, you'll keep the audience's attention a little bit more. So a lot of those horror movies of the 80s, would just gratuitously just show boobs all the
Yeah.
time, so that it kept you going on. But yeah, this movie, I mean, I love it. I mean, there's no real big huge plot to it other than the fact that these guys were a bunch of assholes, and all of a sudden, when it starts getting into the end of this movie, you start figuring out that that the girl who they raped was part of it, and you find out that the guy who's running this bowling alley is her father, that even her friends and stuff didn't know, because they knew, they never knew that who her dad was. I guess he was in jail for a long time or something like that, so they had no idea who he was. And you know just like any father that wants to take matters in his own hands and not call the cops, he's gonna kill down some douchebag frat guys. But then you find out that they were only supposed to really kill the dudes, and they killed like her friends and stuff too, and they're like, what the hell? And then you find out that the one guy was in on it, and the other girl was like, what the shit was going on? Like, it wasn't meant to be like that. And that's when it gets towards the end. That's why one of my favorite parts of this movie, you get to the ending, and, the guy's like, oh, yeah, man, like, it wasn't supposed to be like that. It was only supposed to scare her. And then he just looks at her and is like, give me the gun. She was like, yeah, giving that look, and she's like, bam, motherfucker.
Yeah, and takes out a pair of her assets.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's the thing about movies like this, though, too, is you still, and I give Ryan some credit for it too, is still finding a way to splice in a certain amount of just conflict, where obviously the big conflict comes from the opening situation of the movie that leads to all the crazy revenge. But still, at the same time, there's that little bit of conflict where it was like, dad just trying to look out for daddy's little girl turns into just being like, you know what? No, daddy's just gonna fucking assassinate the world.
Yeah. Yeah, and like I said, when it comes to I mean, I like this movie. When it comes to the realm of bowling movies, which I guess there's not too many of them. I guess on the list of great bowling movies, you would have Kingpin, you'd have The Big Lebowski, and then GutterBalls.
It is, and it's funny like that, dude, because like, can you really also think about other bowling movies? You really can't.
Yeah, I mean, there are always the movies that have bowling
Right.
in it, But like I said, those are the only two movies that I can think of. Even though Big Lebowski doesn't have bowling a lot, I mean, there's a lot of bowling in it. I mean, Kingpin is obviously a throughout bowling movie, pretty much. Yeah, it's like it. That's what I was thinking. It's like when he was thinking, he's like, "Hey man, you ever thought of making Kingpin, but as a horror movie?" That's basically what GutterBalls is. Because even in that movie, there's a lot of that campy, that over sexuality stuff like that, where he can't pay the rent and he's going down on Lin Shay and she's like, so
Right.
so it's like this movie is like kind of an extension. It's like a horror version of that times 10 to the extremeness of other than a lot more blood and a lot more guts in this movie.
Absolutely, man, 100%. So, Devil, what do you say we move over to the obituaries, my friend? Let's talk a little bit about how we rank this movie, and let's start off with yourself, man.
I mean, to me, like I said, I mean, I love this movie. It'd been a while since I've seen it when we started getting into the G's and we decided between, Green Room or Gutter Balls. I was like, you know what? I like Green Room, and that's a movie that we probably might go venture into again because it has a lot of subplots that we could probably put into it. But I figured, Gutter Balls doesn't probably have the fan viewings as much as people like. It's a very very small community probably that have seen this movie as much. It's definitely not a huge marketable movie for multiple reasons. Like I said, not only because it's a more of a low budget kind of DIY movie, but also because of the extreme gore, the extreme sexual nature of it, and the extreme assholeness of these douchebags, in their vocabulary. But yeah, like I said, I myself like to partake in the bowling activities, and I consider this, as far as the horror genre, the creme of bowling horror. I'd have to go into my library and see if there's any other bowling horror movies that I can think of. But if there is, I don't think any are better than Gutter Balls. But that being said, yeah, I mean, this movie is definitely a very very cult like following as far as it's going to be very limited to the people that like to watch it, just like you said with I Spit on Your Grave or The Last House on the Left that we've talked about. It is very violent in its violence and can put off people. It's not supposed to be all laughs and giggles. That those scenes are supposed to kind of horrify you. It gives you a reason for in those movies the revenge and the violence that they endure. You kind of like fuck yeah because you love it because they deserve all the shit that they got. They for doing all the bad shit that they did to these people. But yeah, it's campy. It's over the top horror. It's got a lot of nudity in it. And I don't know if you're gonna give it bonus points, but I'm gonna give the coochie hoochie hoochie vagina in the very beginning from the backside. We didn't even see the vagina from the front. We got to see the vagina from the back, which I mean that's already a plus on my book. If we would just saw it from the front, it would be like your typical horror movie that you get to see vaginas from the front. You don't get to see too many vaginas from the back unless you're watching porn or Skinamax movies. So that's definitely getting some bonus points for me because you know, who doesn't want to argue a nice pair of lips in front of their TV screen for a couple seconds? But
Right.
anyway, like I said, I mean, I like it. Blood's awesome. The gore is awesome. Like I said, I don't think there's a script to this movie. I feel like it was just free willy, kind of just do whatever you want to do. And maybe we recorded 700 hours of footage and then we just spliced in what we thought would be good kind of together because it is kind of choppy at times where they're going all over the place. But like I said, I mean, this movie is it's not meant to be, just like when you're talking about any kind of movie, like you talked about your Rotten Tail, or when we eventually dive into Thanksgiving, Thanksgiving. it's not, this movie's not meant to be taken seriously. I mean, the movie is called GutterBalls.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's a horror movie in a bowling alley. It's not meant to be taken seriously. So anybody who takes this movie and thinks it's going to be on the Criterion, catalog and stuff like that, it's Oscar winning and it's not going to be, it's definitely not going to be winning any awards, anytime soon from the Academy. But anyway, for me, I love it. I think it's fun. Normally, like I said, I would probably give this movie a 6, maybe just because of that. But then you gotta give it a little bit of extra because I love that violence and the gore, which bumps it up to a 7. But then, like I said, I'm gonna give bonus points to the vagina, so I'm just gonna give it an 8 because I like the nudity and I like the absurdness and craziness of this movie. And it's just after watching it again, it just reminded me how fucked up this movie is, and I like fucked up movies because I'm the devil.
No, absolutely, brother. Honestly, I can pretty much meet you on like all of those points and stuff like that. It's all gravy. It all makes sense, dude. I'm definitely with you on those points. Like, look, I love the fact that you're getting certain angular shots that you don't usually get when it comes to movies, and I definitely understand something like that. I love the vulgarity of the movie as far as the attempt at being vulgar. Just like you said, this isn't winning any awards, but it's definitely a very unique vision. It's really solid. I think it's just a good, fun time. Just like you said, in the big picture, the movie's like a 6, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things where I was like, you know what? It is a great time. I really, really love it. I can't I don't hate those scenes. I love that they're in there. Do I rack it up all the way to an 8? I don't. I think for the sake of what we do, I'm going to give this movie personally a solid 7 because our style of meeting in the middle, I think a 7.5 is solid for the movie. I think it's quality for the movie where we're definitely putting it out there to the fans. Hey, Devil loves that revved up stuff. For the record, Vampire likes that stuff too. Just looks at it from a slightly different perspective. So what do you think, buddy? Do you think 7.5 works for this one?
Yeah, I think 7.5, like I said, in the scale of it, is probably way more than what this movie really honestly deserves.
Yes.
But we like with going to the extreme. So, we're gonna give extra bonus points just because, we love the out of the box and box thinking in this movie, if you know what I mean.
Absolutely, for sure. Sometimes you got to give a little bit of appreciation to the dude piston and the ham wallet. Sometimes it just needs to be, acknowledged. But that's the way it's going to be, Fangs. We are locking it in. Letter G in the alphabets of horror, Gutterballs, the devil, and myself, Vampire, we are giving this a 7.5. That's the way it's going to be, and there it shall stand. We appreciate you guys, and we got so much more fun stuff coming up for you. Horns up. Bangs out.
What's up? It's the devil here again with another one of those favorite segments that you like, those 80s horror comedies. This time we just got done watching Monster High. Have you seen this movie yet? No, not the little kitty toy movie. The original, the OG Monster High. Oh yeah, Mr. Armageddon's coming and he's gonna destroy the world. Oh wait, we gotta play a basketball game to decide the fate? Ha ha ha, there's everything you like in this. There's pot smoking, trees that are trying to kill you, there are zombies, there are horny motherfuckers, there are some weird alien dudes, there's a lot of titties. You gotta love this 80s horror. Ha ha ha, it's so funny. It's such a great movie. It's so kooky. It's so stupid. I love it. Go check it out. Check out Monster High, 'cause I said so. Yeah.
All right, Fangs. Let's talk about a fresh coffin nail, shall we? 2023's Alice and the Vampire Queen. It dives deep into overall vampire subculture, as in like night culture. But the thing I actually really like about it is why a lot of movies tend to go in that direction of like nightclubs and things like that. This was more about like almost like a speakeasy style thing. It takes place based around Alice, who's an ex-con, a very talented chef, but due to mistakes in her life, ends up on parole, working and cooking in a shitty restaurant for a guy that mistreats her. She quits, gets basically plucked out of obscurity by this guy who wants her to be the head chef of what turns out to be a vampire coven, where she's making these really elaborate, like basically beef tartare style dishes for the queen vampire and all of her, minions, and her, right-hand men, right-hand women, that kind of thing. But the longer that Alice is a part of this and involved in this life is when her safety gets called into question. Is she going to be protected by the vampire queen for all these amazing dishes that she does? Or is she at risk due to the fact that people are going to be looking to take down the vampire queen and take her place? So would they try to go through Alice to allow for that? Or does she want to stay a part of this culture in this lifestyle, or does she not? Spoiler alert, she never gets turned to a vampire in this movie, but that has more to do with the fact that that's not what the movie is about when it comes to Alice. This is basically about a familiar, for lack of a better term, and what she brings to the table and whether or not she wants to stay. But I would have loved to have seen what this movie had to offer. Should it have had a bigger budget? I think that would have been very cool. I liked the attire. I thought the ideas behind the special effects, like the practical effects, were very excellent. The fangs were in the right places. The attire looked good. And overall, I actually thought the acting was pretty solid. So for an independent film, I'm actually going to give it some pretty solid marks. I'm going to give this a 7 in my coffin nail. 7 out of 10. That's the way it's going to be. Horns up, but fangs out for Alice and the Vampire Queen.
As we continue on with those who have died in August, we honor some more. Matthew McGrory from House of a Thousand Corpses and Devil's Rejects. The late great Peter Cushing and all of his glorious horror movies. We also honor Sharon Tate, taken away from us from the Manson family in August. We'd also like to add a bonus. Gene Wilder, the greatest Willy Wonka ever. We honor those who have died, lost, but never forgotten.